Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth, also known as the Continuum Chronicles. As always, I'm your host, Chris Kent, and today we're talking about one of my favorite superhero franchises of all time, The Incredibles. But before we get into that, smash that like button, make sure you're subscribed, ring the bell for notifications, and as always, be sure to leave us a comment as that really helps us out with the YouTube algorithm. We have an incredible community here, and it's all thanks to you guys. Thank you so much for being here. With all that said, let's dive in. The prologue to today's story takes place in the Golden Age when Elastigirl met a man named Xerek. The two of them dated for a while, but Helen discovered her boyfriend was secretly a supervillain, so she broke it off. And being a villain, Xerek didn't take that well, not at all. Which brings us to the main plot of today's game. Superman Red is in a hospital recovering from some recent injuries he sustained in Europe. Helen is in that same hospital as Elastigirl, checking up on someone she recently rescued. So Helen and Red meet for the first time. And as always, Red has the Valentino effect from a game called Tales from the Floating Vagabond. So that means that Helen is very interested in him. He likes what he sees too. She makes the first move, flirting with him. She tells him she likes his red costume. He tells her she looks great in her costume too. They really hit it off, and he asks if she'd like to have dinner with him. She accepts, but says the hospital's closing for the day and the cafeteria is probably closed. Red says he had something else in mind, so they head to a restaurant on top of a building where they have a view of the city at night. To Red's surprise, Helen isn't like most women of this time period in more ways than one. She's surprisingly assertive. Helen asks if he'd like to go back to her place for drinks, and he says he'd love to. So they walk to her place, and on the way, she starts to worry a little. So she asks if Red is a supervillain. He laughs and says he isn't, then asks if that's a turnoff or something, that maybe the feisty Helen likes bad boys. Helen gives an embarrassed laugh and says it's just that her ex-boyfriend turned out to be a supervillain. Before Red can say anything, Xerek says, "Ex-boyfriend, Helen, of all the nerve." Helen gasps to see him hiding in the bushes, and she is quick to anger. "Xerek," she exclaims, "what are you doing here?" Xerek straightens his tie as his thugs slowly emerge from their various hiding places. "I was waiting on my girlfriend to come home from the hospital." He narrows his eyes at Superman Red. "I wasn't expecting you to cheat on me again, though I can't say I'm surprised." Helen is furious. "Cheat on you? You sound like a lunatic. We aren't together anymore, Xerek." Xerek lowers his head, and the shadow of his heavy brow gives him a sinister look. "Oh, you're mine, all right." The villain snaps his fingers, and his henchmen move in to get her. Superman Red multi-attacks several of them with his super breath, making a joke that this wasn't the blowjob he'd hoped the night had in store. Helen smirks and says the night is young, then punches one thug with her right fist, hitting him and knocking him out. It might be worth noting that while we were playing this, we were using hero clicks for this game. So in the middle of our dry erase board that we use as a map, Helen and Red are in the center. Surrounding them on all sides are the henchmen. So when they had multi-attack henchmen with an attack like Super Breath, that particular attack is cone-shaped and can only take out the thugs in the direction that that hero is facing. Does that make sense? That's why there are still bad guys left after the heroes already went. At any rate, that said, so it's the villain's turn. The henchmen are armed with lightning guns. Each gun is made of silver, chrome colored metal and has little rings at the end of the barrel that look like a series of satellite dishes. Classic retro futuristic aesthetic. The henchmen shoot lightning bolts at the heroes, declaring knockout damage only. Xerek arcs an eyebrow and says he doesn't care how invulnerable Superman Red is. If he's alive, he has a nervous system, and it has to run on electricity. So, at the very least, these weapons will paralyze him. As his muscles tense up, freezing him in place, the men will kidnap the girl. What Xerek doesn't take into account is Red's dexterity of 26 APs. The goons have a weaponry skill of 10 APs, which is peak human, but they still need to roll a 28 or higher on two 10-sided dice in order to hit Red, and none of them do. Helen is knocked out, but Red hasn't been touched, and now he's mad. So he scoops up Helen in his arms and flies straight up. From cloud level, he uses his telescopic vision and heat vision, and now he's basically a sniper. So he takes out Xerek first. Xerek's men freak out and scatter. One runs into a building, so Red uses X-ray vision and snipes him anyways. Over the next several rounds, there's nowhere the villains can hide. Red snipes them all. He then flies to a tropical island with Helen. Which brings us to the epilogue of today's game. Helen wakes up in a supervillain's hideout inside of a volcano. She looks around and finds herself on a large round bed. Not far away is Red, mixing cocktails at the bar. "I thought you said you weren't a supervillain," she asks. "I'm not," he smiles. "Then what's with the volcano lair?" she wants to know. "It belonged to a villain, who I defeated." He smiles and hands her a drink. "So you kept it?" she asks. "I did," he says, as they both drink their cocktails. "Think of this as my fortress of solitude." Helen blows a strand of hair out of her face, then smiles at him. She drinks her drink and is shocked how good it is. She tells Superman Red he should quit the crime fighting gig and just become a full-time bartender, which is foreshadowing because later in our timeline, he is a bartender. He owns a tiki bar called the Continuum Bar and Grill, which is actually one of the most incredibly popular things we have ever done in our 40 years of gaming. But that's a story for another day. We hope that you enjoyed this adventure. If so, we'd love it if you hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed, ring the bell for notifications, and as always, be sure to leave us a comment, as that really helps out with the algorithm. From everyone here at the longest running superhero RPG on Earth, we hope you guys have an incredible week, and we will see you in the next adventure. Bye.